This festive season and summer holidays, there's no better time to indulge in Australia's best coffee at Roasting Warehouse. Whether you're in Perth, Brisbane, Athens or Melbourne, experience the perfect brew crafted with passion. Visit their flagship roastery and HQ in Airport West where the magic happens, or drop by any of their stunning cafes for not just incredible coffee, but service and a cafe experience like no other. Celebrate this season with Roasting Warehouse.
And it's their leading goal scorer and captain, Stefan Moore.
James Holland, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen. It's a pleasure. I rolled the dice and went to China, and in the end, they didn't pay me wages. And the PFA, the lawyer, called us and said, "You guys have got to get out of the country as quick as possible." So we just were like, booked our flights and bailed. I went to training and they were kind of said to me, "Look, our suggestion would be to go to Newcastle. You're going to play there, you won't play here."
They obviously didn't rate you enough that you weren't going to be good enough to play for Central Coast, but you go to Newcastle, end up winning it.
Good decision in the end.
How have you gone mentally in terms of finishing football?
It's been an uncomfortable process, absolutely. I think I wouldn't call myself, I'm not necessarily in a happy place, and it's definitely been a difficult period, and it's an uncomfortable transition.
And welcome back to another episode of Football Friends with Ben and Stef. We have a very special guest today, someone that you've played with. I haven't played with, but we've got a lot of mutual friends. None other than the Hoff himself is very good mates with James Holland. Speaks very highly of him. Ollie Bozanic obviously was the one that kind of recommended him. So we're lucky he's back in Australia at the moment, and we've managed to tie him down.
Yeah, when Ollie mentioned him, I was thinking, why haven't we kind of thought of him? And I think probably being someone who has spent so much of his career overseas, you kind of do sometimes forget, or they're maybe not in the front of your mind, but he's someone that will be a great chat because, he can talk underwater, the guy, but he's also very insightful and he's had an unbelievable career. And now that he's come off the back of it, you probably learn to reflect a little bit more on it. So it'll be interesting to see what he's got to say. I'm looking forward to it, and he's here now, so let's get him in. Joining us today, I've got another fellow old teammate of mine, someone that I was lucky enough to cross paths with, someone that's now enjoying the life on the other side of football, enjoying life still in Austria, but back at the moment and good enough to join us. We got James Holland. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, gentlemen. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's obviously we've been going through the guests, and who was it? Ollie Bozanic that mentioned you the other day. Yourself and Matty Ryan came up, and that's why we thought we would reach out. And obviously you've probably been the quickest guest, I reckon, to reply and get on the podcast. And after just seeing how punctual you were with getting on here at the right time, and our mate Benny up the top there running 5 minutes late, I can see why you replied so quickly and why you've been such a good professional in your career.
Yes, mate. First of all, raised by a mother that drilled punctuality into me. And secondly, Benny Garuccio's habits clearly didn't rub off on me as a teammate. So thank God. But yeah.
Look, I will just say,
tell me.
I was working hard to get my body right because I'm currently injured, and I'm doing everything I can to get myself right. And that's the reason I was late. So it was a little bit selfish, but you would understand that in the career of a footballer, you have to be a little bit selfish sometimes.
I completely understand that. And as an athlete, it kind of comes natural to be a little bit selfish. But me personally, I probably would have made sure I had a little bit more time to train, and I was punctual to my own podcast. At least that's how I would do things. But
Hey,
lucky your best mate. Lucky your best mate. Dragged you over the line in the end, mate, and he was punctual.
I'll put my hand up. It's not on. It's not on. I've been put on show here a little bit, but look, you got to put your hand up. It's part of being a good pro. You got to put your hand up when you're wrong.
Absolutely. And speaking of Ollie, I went for a run with him this morning. Ollie Bozanic, the great man. So he mentioned to me that he was on the podcast.
So what, two rigs floating about fucking Terrigal.
Ollie's got me covered, mate. He's
The
you can iron a shirt on that bloke's body, mate. He's chiseled. He's chiseled.
the bloody the school drop off. The school drop off could have been dangerous this morning for a few of the young mums going around Terrigal.
Wow, mate. Not with me, mate. Not with me. Cage man, in that regard. Anyway, should we
Yeah.
get to the serious stuff?
Let's get into it. Let's get into it. We always start. We like to go back to the beginning, kind of your upbringing, your childhood, and how you were led into football or how it came into your life.
Well, I guess it's fitting that Ollie is involved in that, getting me on the podcast, I guess. So my mum initially threw me into football just because I was a real sporty kid. Grew up with a single parent, and she didn't want me playing league or any of that kind of stuff. It was a bit too rough for her liking, so I just jumped into football and really enjoyed it, and kind of was good at least locally. And yeah, I mean, I always kind of dreamt of playing for Australia and all that kind of stuff. But growing up with just a mum who was supportive but didn't really have too much idea of professional sports. Ollie's dad actually played a bit of a role in kind of helping me get into the representative teams and bringing me to Sydney and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there, I guess. But initially, my mum just threw me into it just because I was outside all day, every day, and she knew I had to play sport, and that was her sport of choice, and I fell in love with it straight away. So,
It's
yeah.
definitely a good choice, obviously, by her to get you into this with the what ended up transpiring, and you then went to the New South Wales Institute of Sport. I guess was that the first moment in your career where you kind of thought, okay, I'm pretty good. I might have a chance in making it.
Um, to be honest, mate, I mean, I remember coming home when I was about 8 years old and telling my mum I was going to play for Australia and buy her a house. So I was aggressively confident from a young age, I guess. No, probably naively. My coach at the time told me that I was good enough for whatever reason. I think he was just didn't want to crush an 8-year-old's dreams. And then I actually made the step to Parramatta Eagles with Ollie when I was 13, and that time they had an affiliation with Manchester United, and um, so it kind of Matty German was involved. I don't know if you know Sean Rooney, but a few boys that kind of ended up doing well in football later on. Um, yeah, we had a good little group. So at that time, I knew I was okay, at least within New South Wales perspective, I was decent. And then obviously came N-Swiss, which was yeah, also another little, I guess, confirmation that I was doing okay at the time.
Yeah. From there, you went. Was it from the N Swiss you went directly to the AIS, or were you with the Mariners before going to the AIS?
So I was Redders is also Redmayne. Andrew Redmayne is also a Central Coast boy. So Ollie Redders and I were involved in Mariners as youngsters, kind of 16-year-olds. We were doing the we're at school obviously, and we were training with N-Swiss, and we would get involved at Mariners when they needed a couple of extra players. That was at the very beginning with Laurie McKenna. And then Ollie kind of jumped over to C's, and Redders and I went to the AIS. So that was just, I guess, just the natural progression of the whole N-Swiss Institute. And I would argue and say that was probably, and I want to be careful and don't want to diss any of my old coaches, but AIS was probably the first time that we had actually been coached properly, because I guess the academies back then weren't really set up well. And I mean, for us on the Central Coast, we were driving hour and 40 minutes each way just every day just to go to training. So it was a big slog with not much end product, but I guess it taught us a lot of grit and resilience, and gave us that kind of work ethic at the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Who was the coaches at the AIS when you went in?
That was Steve O'Connor, Ray Junior, and Paul Foster, so Craig Foster's brother, and Gibbo was also involved. So yeah, they were kind of the coaches that were there, and they'd obviously seen a lot of like the golden generation go through, and that was just the first time that we were introduced probably to the idea of principles in football, instead of kind of a principle based idea of coaching as opposed to just tactical and learning different shapes and whatever. And that was the first time you learned it's like, I guess, at chess, you can learn different openings. It's kind of like learning tactics, or you learn about how to manipulate space on the chessboard kind of thing. And that was the first time we actually had to think about the game from a different perspective. And they kind of started to plant those seeds, at least from my interpretation, into our football brains at the time.
How did you go there with it? Obviously, moving away at a young age, outside of football. How did you cope with that?
Loved it, man. That was honestly arguably one of the most influential years in my career. It's just teachers taught you how to be a professional. You're surrounded by the best athletes in Australia. You just live and breathe it. You learn how to look after yourself physically. We'd get to the gym at 6:30 in the morning. You'd have all the Olympic athletes there working out. You could watch, you could learn, and it's just that environment, right? You are the sum of the people you hang out with in your environment, and that was for me, mate. I just lived and breathed it. I was disappointed I didn't go there when I was 14 or 15 because obviously, you're starting off a little bit on the back foot because you're going there at such a young age, but. Really grateful to have that time and just lived it and breathed it. Loved it.
We were 15 when we went. So what age was it back then that they used to take the players in at?
So
This was
we,
1960, wasn't it?
yeah, something like that, mate. When was that? 2007, I think it was. So I just finished year 12. So I was 17. I was 17, yeah. I think I was 17 at the time.
You must have been 16 or just turned 17 because
No, I was
when you were 18 when you got to the Jets, weren't you?
yeah, and I was still I just turned 18, I think, when I played my first game for the Jets. So I was 17, turned 18 while I was there. Because I remember because I used to sneak out and do some partying at the time. Um, so, yeah,
Fucking hell, you just said it taught you how to be a professional.
it did, mate. It taught me balance, mate. That's what it taught me. I've definitely contradicted myself, but yeah, I was 18. I turned 18 during that period. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Good
then
time.
who were the other players that kind of went on from that group that had good careers?
Redders was obviously a big part of that group. Other boys, Lucky DeVere went on.
Oh yeah,
Obviously had a good A-League career. Sebastian Ryle, obviously at the end had a bit some issues, but had like a solid A-League career. Who else was involved? Matty German.
It
That's
was
about
it
it.
was the best, like, for me. I don't know, speaking for ourselves here, me and Steph, we've spoken about this before, but it was the best fucking development that you could have in Australia. And
Absolutely.
obviously that's something that I actually wanted to chat to you about. Like, compared to obviously overseas, you spent so long overseas, which we'll get to, but the development, we lack it so badly here. And only now we're just getting the academies, that they're starting to get a bit better. At least it's decent coaching. But for us, like, if we didn't go to the AIS, fuck, I don't think I would have been half the player, because what I learned there in that 1.5 years, 2 years that you're there, fucking, you learn, like, you go from a kid, I couldn't even fucking wake up in the morning, my mum would wake me up, to then all of a sudden you're fucking learning, all right, yep, this is, I need to be here at this time, I need to be at the gym at this time. You're getting punished if you're not there, but then you got nutritionists, you got psychologists, like, you got the world at your fingertips while you're there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's obviously a lesson on football and life, right? And um, it translates a lot over into life, but also then if you move over to Europe and going out into the big wide world of European football, that year for me personally helped me out a lot. And I think it just teaches you, it gives you a lot more of a holistic view of what it is to be a professional footballer. And I think beforehand, as I was talking about what we went through from the Central Coast to Sydney and all the traveling we did and all that kind of stuff, it taught us hard work and grit and resilience. But that kind of taught us football, taught us how to be a pro, taught us how to look at it from every different perspective. And that's why when I saw that the AIS was getting eliminated, I was really disappointed. And obviously I got a bit of a biased view, and I wouldn't pretend to have any idea of what youth football is looking like in Australia right now. But I was like, oh shit, that was basically the only kind of solid education I got. And so it's disappointing now if the players aren't getting that, but hopefully the clubs are providing that for the players these days. But yeah, I totally agree with you, man. Brilliant. Brilliant.
yeah. It was. I think the problem was when they got rid of it, there was no plan in place. It was just literally a budget cut for Football Australia, and they were like, oh, well, the clubs can deal with it. And then the clubs weren't really set up. Like Adelaide United still doesn't have an academy now for their juniors. We just feed off Football South Australia, who has a really good system. but you're putting a lot of onus, like in my opinion, on clubs who are privately owned, and you're expecting these clubs to bankroll this for the players when the federation obviously should have a massive, say, or at least be doing their bit as well to kind of, create the next golden generation, or at least some players that are going to go on and play in European leagues. So it's getting better now, but it's still not what it's like in Europe. Obviously, money is the biggest issue with everything, whether it's the clubs, whether it's the federation, APL. It's all a little bit of a disaster. But getting back onto your career, you then did sign for the Jets. So obviously, being from the Central Coast, why did you sign for the Jets? Did Central Coast not come in for you, or you wanted to go and check a Newey out?
No, well, obviously, I had the short stint, like I had like a injury replacement stint, 2 weeks at Newcastle. Did really well. Went over to Europe for a trial. Was a shambles. The agent didn't do a great job to organise anything. Came back to the AIS, and then I had the Central Coast, and I had Newcastle Jets on the table. I think I had a couple of other clubs at the time as well. And I wanted a short-term contract because I wanted to bounce straight back over to Europe. But Newcastle wouldn't give me that, and Central Coast would. And in the end, I said, all right, I'll sign for Central Coast then. But then I went to training and I hadn't signed the contract yet. And I spoke to a couple of the boys at the time, and they were kind of said to me, look, and I spoke to them about my situation. I was an 18-year-old kid, and the Central Coast boys kind of said, look, our suggestion would be to go to Newcastle. You're going to play there, you won't play here. And I looked at the team. It was an older squad. They were pretty steady. Laurie didn't really change the team at that time. And it was a tough conversation because I'd already given him my word, but I called him up after that and I said, look, I'm going to go to Newcastle. And he was, wasn't happy about it. But then I went to Newcastle and I guess the rest is history, mate. It's a good decision in the end.
You went there. They said you weren't, well, good. They obviously didn't rate you enough that you weren't going to be good enough to play for Central Coast, but you go to Newcastle, end up winning it.
Yeah, no, but I mean, to be fair to the boys at Central Coast, they were good. Like they would just give me honest feedback. And at the time, Mile Jednak had just kind of come into the team, and it just wasn't. And other than him, it was a kind of an older team. And Newcastle wanted me to Dutchy. Gary Van Egmond really wanted me. He wanted me to play, but they just wanted to give me a 2.5 year contract, and they wouldn't budge on it. The owner. And then I thought I was never going to get out of Australia because who bought players from Australia at the time? And then I won the championship, was lucky. And during that time, scouts from RZ Alkmaar came over, and they came over for Nikita Rukavica. And that coincidentally, that day they were playing us in Newcastle, and I had one of my better games. And then the next week they came to a game that I was playing the Central Coast, and I had another really good game. And then that's kind of how that snowballed, which was again a bit of luck.
Crazy how football works like that, isn't it? Like it seems like every guest that we get on here and we speak to, there's some sort of luck, and then it goes the other way at some point where, obviously there's bad luck that comes into it, but, small little decisions, like just as easily, you could have signed the contract before you went and those boys said that to you, and you never end up at Newcastle, and your career could be completely different. Or you could have had a stinker in that game against Perth Glory, and the scouts don't come and watch the next game where you play really well. But obviously it didn't happen that way. So RZ Alkmaar come in for you. Was that the only club that kind of put an offer on the table from overseas at that stage?
Yeah. To be honest, I'd only just signed for Newcastle at the time, and the agent I was with wasn't doing a great job. And as you said, luck's obviously you work hard to put yourself in positions, and luck is always a factor. I think it's always there. And at that time, I got lucky. They came in, they wanted me, they put in an offer. And Newcastle got decent money for it, and that was kind of it. I didn't think twice. I said, look, I want to go. Let me go, and that was kind of it. And I was also, again, luck was involved in it. So the current sports director of RZ Alkmaar was at that time the head scout, and he had played with Arnie. And at that time, Arnie was assistant coach of the national team, head coach of the Olympic Olyroos, which I was involved in at the time. And he had called Arnie, and Arnie said, yeah, at that time, most exciting young talent in Australia. And so kind of told them a few lies. And, it was expensive for me. But anyway, it got me over there, got me over the line. But again, it was just kind of worked out. But as you said, luck and bad luck, it's all part of life, man, football and life. It's ups and downs. And at that time, I got a bit lucky. Worked my hard to get myself in that situation, but got lucky. Yeah, for sure.
No, you got to play well though. At the end of the day, like those scouts were there. If you have a fucking stinker, which happened every other game that season, then you wouldn't have got the move. But
Yeah.
what about obviously going to RZ? So you obviously the hardest thing is getting the move, but then obviously going there, you want to then progress and keep going. How was that transition for you? Obviously, it was probably more difficult than the transition from the AIS to Newcastle.
Tough. Yeah, tough. I mean, I was a 19-year-old kid, 18, 19 at the time. And you go over there naive, and I went from being a big fish in a small pond to a little fish in a big pond. And that was, at that time, I was at Alkmaar. Louis van Gaal was coach. We had a team full of, internationals, 3 midfielders from the Dutch team that made the finals, I think, in 2010 World Cup. And then there was Moussa Dembele. The team was just full of superstars basically, and I had no chance. I was nowhere near good enough. I was absolutely out of my depth. And just learning a new language. Obviously, you come over as a youngster, so all the other youngsters are against you a little bit because you're a foreigner coming in trying to take their position. And so it's just without getting the violin out, it's what every Aussie at a young age kind of faces when they go over to Europe. With the language barrier and everything, and just life as a 19-year-old alone over in Europe, you kind of you go through all of that stuff. But I never ever. I remember having a conversation with my agent at the time. He called me, and I think Ange was coach at Brisbane Roar, and he said, "Oh, look, Brisbane Roar want you." And I said to him, "If he ever calls me again and offers me a contract, tells me I need to go back to Australia, offers me a contract from Australia, I'll terminate our contract." Because the only way I'm going back to Australia is you have to drag me back on my hands and knees. So that was my mindset. So I was never going to, and that was me at like 19 or 20, just because I was so fixated on Europe, and I'd always had been, that I was going to do everything I could to make it. Although at that time I was like running on a treadmill and as hard as I can, and I was going nowhere kind of thing. But that was just my mindset at the time.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, to be honest, that mindset. I think that's something that's probably gone away, and like Ben and myself can speak to that. Like I thought, in Australia, I would be like, yeah, mentally I was quite tough before I went to go overseas. I went to Holland as well, and that first year for me was a disaster. And getting the agent calling you saying, we've got, you can come back here, this team wants you. For me, it was like, fuck, like they want me, so maybe it is a good thing. I said, yeah, I want to stay in Europe. He couldn't bring me anything, so I said, oh, well, I'll go back. But that's probably my only regret. Like, I don't have too many regrets in football, but that's my only regret, because once you go back to Australia, it's very hard to come back. So what do you think it was that made you have that mentality at such a young age? And then from that, when you were struggling, what was it that really helped you get out of or get up to speed over there in Holland?
Good questions. First of all, I'll go back to what you said, and because I went through that experience, whenever I saw young Aussies go over, and at that time I'd played with Riley McGree, and he had just come into the first team. Afterwards, he'd just come into the first team later on in my career, and I went back overseas, and I saw him go overseas, and I saw him bounce back straight away, and I was like, every time I saw it, I was like, nah, like tough it out, because it's so hard then to get back over to Europe, if you know what I mean. If you get your foot in the door, my mindset was always, and I loved seeing Aussies go over and do well. I was like, just tough it out, tough it out. But the A League has given Aussies, I think, a safe place to fall back into. And I think there's a positive, but that's the negative, because you're all of a sudden, you're a superstar in Australia, and you think, okay, I'll go back to being a superstar in Australia. And to answer your questions, I think my upbringing gave me that resilience and mindset, and it was also probably a little bit of a fear of failure and all that kind of stuff. I didn't like failure. I had maybe a bit of an inferiority complex there growing up with not so much, and I just had this drive. I was like, okay, I need to succeed. I have to, and that was just always there. And I think how I got through it was just grit, man. It's just hard work. Whether it was a right or wrong way to do it, whenever things didn't work out, for me, my career was just like, okay, got to work harder, got to do more. And it was probably more often than not counterproductive. But for whatever reason, in the end, it kind of just figured itself out, I guess.
Wow, it's interesting. You've always been a grafter. I remember when we were young, Hoffy always said to us, if there's one person, like, because I always used to say to him, fucking hell, Hoff, how are you so fit? And he goes, fuck, if you think I'm fit, fucking you should have seen James Holland when we were younger. That cunt would be fucking calling me after the hardest session going, come on, what are you doing, Hoff? What, you're still in bed? Fucking, aren't we going to do a session together?
Yeah,
So it's obviously carried you a long way. And then you obviously went on to have a loan in Holland before moving to Austria, Vienna, where you kind of made a really good name for yourself. How did that all kind of come about, and how were those next couple of years, your time at RZ as well?
RZ was just a battle, to be honest. It was like an apprenticeship, some good life lessons. And then I went on that short loan. There was Rob Barn. He was involved in Australian football back then. He got the sports director gig at Sparta. Pim Verbeek helped me a little bit as well at that time. Just spent 6 months there. I think I played 14 games, came back. RZ didn't really want me. And then I was playing with Joey Dudulica at the time. And he's a bit of a superstar at Austria Vienna, had a really good time there. And his mate basically got the job. And we'd played them in the Europa League, and called him and said, "Do you have a number 6?" And Joey, first of all, he said, there's a team in Ukraine that want you for a lot of money, basically, and we can get you there. And I was like, "No, I don't. It's not about money for me." And then a couple of weeks later, he called me and said, "Okay, Austria Vienna." I think I was coincidentally partying in St. Anton. So St. Anton in Austria is a bit of a ski destination, a bit of a party ski destination. And it was New Year's, so it was just New Year's Eve. And I was probably about 15 beers deep. And he called me, and it was the first time I actually been to Austria. And he said to me, Joey called me and said, "Oh, my mate's just got this gig in Austria Vienna. Are you keen?" And I was like, "Yeah, why not? I'm going nowhere at RZ, so why not?" So 5 days later, flew back to Vienna. I flew back to Amsterdam, got packed my stuff, and basically moved to Vienna. And that was kind of how it started. Again, just a bit of luck, but obviously Joey would have never recommended me if he didn't see I was a hard worker. And, so I think, again, if you invest, you kind of reap the rewards in the end. And after 3 years of hard work, he kind of opened that door for me.
Yeah, and so if you were saying you were kind of going nowhere at RZ, was the standard just too high for you, or was it the style of football they were playing? Like, what was it exactly that was kind of limiting you there?
Initially, standard was way too high for me. And again, I think I was just way behind the 8 ball. Didn't have that academy, didn't have a really good foundation, went over there. And it was just, everyone was better than me, basically. And they had a superstar team. They won the championship that year. Brett Holman was there. He was on the bench at that time, I think, initially. But yeah, they just were full of internationals, and I was nowhere near good enough. And as we moved on as I moved on through those 3 years, there were moments where I did really well and they were planning with me. And it was just then bad timing. Like then the under-20s World Cup came up, and it's a decision: do you want to play for Australia? I was captain of the under-20s or not? And that was at that time they said, "All right, you're going into the first team." And they said, "Go to the under," and I said, "I want to go to the under-20s." Went to the under-20s, came back, and another kid had taken the chance off me. And that's just Europe, right? And there was a few situations where I was just doing really well. And then Dick Advocat really wanted me in the first team. And then all of a sudden Putin called him and he had to go to Russia. And then all of a sudden he was no longer our coach. And then a new coach, he came in and didn't like me. Verbeek, he was at Adelaide. So it was just always a kind of...
You had Gertjan.
Yeah, and he was the one that in the end kind of cut me off at the knees at RZ.
I know we're not meant to speak too badly about people, but fucking hell. I only saw him for about a month. But fuck me, the boys... did not like him, and what a character he is.
He's a different cat. But yeah, look, I'm not going to say not that I'm going to say anything badly about him, but he was the one in the end. And it was just initially I wasn't good enough, and then it was just timing, just bad luck. As you spoke about luck, that was just bad luck every time something came up. And I could have made the decision not to play for Australia in the Under-20s World Cup, but playing for my country was my number one. So, and then it just every time something came up, it was just bad luck, basically.
Yeah. Well, hey, this isn't Paramount Plus. It's a podcast, so I'll fucking say it for you. Do you both think he's a shit bloke? You're just afraid to say it.
No, I wouldn't say he's a shit bloke. He's just an odd dude, man. He's one of the oddest human beings I've ever met in football. And I'm not afraid to say someone's a shit bloke, but he's just an odd dude. He's off the charts.
Yeah, man. There's probably one story. I'm not sure if I actually can say that one, but one of the other ones that happened was So he's a bit of a handyman. So he built his own house in
Yeah, I
Holland.
know. Yeah, I know.
And
I know.
here in Adelaide,
That was when he
like,
was our coach. Yeah,
oh, was it?
yeah.
So obviously he's good with his hands. He was living in Semaphore, but in like a heritage listed house.
Yeah.
And apparently he's just gone to Bunnings because he wanted to make some changes to the house. He's made all the changes to the house. He's kept the receipts and then invoiced the club to say send this to the owner of the house for the stuff that he bought from Bunnings and for his time. And they didn't even ask for it. And they said, it's fucking heritage listed. You can't change anything.
That sounds about right, man. He was an odd dude. He was so strange. But yeah, anyway. That was he was the end of my time at RZ, mate. So
That says
you've then
that
gone
speaks volumes.
to Austria, Vienna, obviously, like you're saying. What, straight away when you got there, what was the standard difference? I know every league's different. You can't compare and say one's better or worse, but in terms of, you're saying at RZ, you're a little bit out of your depth potentially. When you got to Austria, Vienna, did you think, fuck, you know what, I'm good enough to be a starting player here? Could you feel that straight away?
the standard wasn't necessarily different at the time. And I felt it straight away just because I had the backing from the coach. And obviously, fresh start. I'd had that 3 years of experience, so I knew what I was getting myself into. So you just go into it with a different mindset. But the first 6 months weren't great again. Like I didn't have a good time the first 6 months. I played, then I didn't play. Then I had a bit of a disagreement with the coach. Didn't take it well. And then he kind of then froze me out a little bit. And then again, it was luck. A new coach came in, Peter Stoger. Don't know if you know him. He ended up coaching Dortmund in the end, and he liked me. And I just played, man, and I played, and it was a bit of a perfect storm. The team was really good. We were then really successful. He, for whatever reason, he still tells me to this day I was his favourite player. And yeah, that was it, man. It was just a really cool, right place, right time. Had a really cool time, really cool season where we were champions, qualified for Champions League, broke the points record against the Salzburg team that was heaving with talent. And yeah, the standard was probably at that time, at least that year, was probably even better at RZ Alkmaar, to be honest.
Wow. Did you say to the gaffer, you're fucking pissing in my pocket because you never fucking took me to Dortmund with you?
Well, coincidentally, he sat me down in that season, and he sat me down to have a bit of a conversation with me. He was like, James, I love your lifestyle, but you got to be a little bit careful sometimes. And I said, all right, no worries, gaffer. I understand what you're trying to say. And then we had a conversation about football, and he said, look, if I ever go anywhere, then you're the only player I'll take with me. That's what he said to me. And I said, oh, okay, awesome. And I said, even if you go to Borussia Dortmund. And he said, even if I go to Borussia Dortmund. And the next season he went to Cologne. And Cologne were in the second league, and we were going to be supposed to be champions. We were champions playing Champions League. And he sent me a message, he said, I'm going to bring you in, but have a season in Champions League, and then I'll bring you in next season when we qualify for the first Bundesliga. And so then they qualified for the first Bundesliga, and he went to bring me in, and the sports director blocked it. And then he tried to bring me in 3 times, and the sports director blocked it every time. And so then he tried to bring me to Cologne 3 times, but he blocked it every time. And in Germany, the club, it's structured in a different way. It's kind of like Holland, right? They give the coach a little bit of leeway, but the sports director decides what the squad's going to look like. And this particular sports director, I don't know if you know him, his last station was Liverpool, as sports director with Klopp. His name's Schmatke. And his thing is, he's a strong character and he wants to make the decisions, and he blocked it every time. So unlucky, mate.
He stayed honest to his word.
No, he's one of the most solid, honest coaches I've ever worked with. Brilliant human being. Yeah, that he kept his word.
That's pretty crazy. I think that's one thing I've seen with some coaches or different people that look to bring you in. When things are going good, obviously they need you, so they're going to be talking to you. They're going to be saying how good you are. But then if they leave to go somewhere else, football's a very harsh world where they think, fuck it, I just worry about myself now. Forget about those players. I'll move on to the next job, which is, I understand it. That's the industry we're in, but it's also very smart to keep people close because you never know when you're going to need that player again or whatever it may be. Works both ways. I think you want to keep people always on side, and that's, like Ben said, it's pretty amazing that he did try and bring you in to Cologne. Was that an ambition of yours to get to a bigger league? Obviously, you're in Austria. Were you always thinking, if I could, I would love to get to the Bundesliga?
Absolutely. And I'll go back to what you said about the coaches. I think obviously you need to keep everyone on side, but a constant and 3 coaches come to mind that I've been lucky enough to work with. A constant that I've recognised in successful coaches is that they're great human beings at the end of the day. And I'm not saying there's right or wrong, and obviously just my interpretation of what a good human being is, but they're really trustworthy, they're really reliable, and they're just solid human beings. And I think he's a great example of that. And speaking of my ambitions, absolutely. At that time, I was in touch with Werder Bremen, I was in touch with Club Bruges, and I could have earned a lot more money at Club Bruges at the time. Werder Bremen was circling, but for me, it was like, what do I do kind of thing, because it was the first season I'd actually played football in Europe, and I'd been there for 4 years, and I was really well aware of that. And that time I was all of a sudden the Socceroos again. I was important and all that kind of stuff, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm a solid part of a really good team. I was in the leadership group. I think I was vice captain at the time or whatever, or vice captain at the time, as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old for a European team that played in Champions League. I was consistently in the Socceroos, and I didn't want to just mess that up. And so I was conscious about it. I said to myself, okay, stay another season, go to Cologne, that'll be fine. In hindsight, maybe it probably would have been a better decision to go to Bruges or something like that, because I did have those ambitions. But when everything's going your way, all of a sudden you kind of think it'll be fine now. I've got the ball rolling. I'll figure it out. Things are going to work out. And then, life has a way of slapping you in the face. Football has a way of slapping you in the face.
What ended up happening? Why did you leave?
So basically, it got to a stage at Austria Vienna where I was 25. I'd been a really important part of that period within the team. They'd offered me, new sports director came in. He basically said, we're going to change the salary structure. We want to start paying big wages. We're going to build a team around 3 or 4 players. You're one of them. And basically at the time, we want you to be captain and all this kind of stuff. And I was 25, and I thought, I'm in my comfort zone. And my headspace was, and because prior to that, I'd been in touch with Bundesliga clubs, I thought, I'm 25 in the national team, had a successful period. Although I wasn't playing brilliant at the time, I'm attractive for a lot of clubs. And so I communicated to my club really early on, out of respect. I don't want to extend the contract. So I went from captaining the team 1 week to then the next week being on the bench. And I completely understood that's football, right? And they have to plan for the future then and all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, that was like 3 or 4 months before the transfer window opened. Then all of a sudden, you're not really playing, you're in and out, you lose your confidence. Transfer window comes, and then you're scrambling. And that left me then in a bit of a shitty situation. Probably naive from my side, to be honest. But again, just trying to make decisions based on my morals as a human being. Got slapped in the face.
Maybe the honesty was obviously was too honest, because to be honest, it actually is a very good thing to do, to let the club know. But then, like you said, they think, well, fuck this guy then. We're not going to get anything out of him. We're going to play someone else. So did you have at that stage an agent that was advising you to say that to them, or that was just your own accord?
I don't. At that time, I had an agent. He definitely wouldn't have said that to me. I won't say who the agent is, but he definitely wouldn't have said that to me. He would have had a very different approach. But to be honest, mate, and it's something I think about a lot, because I wasn't always diplomatic. I said things based on what I felt was a part of being a good teammate, a part of being a good good human being, basically. And I kind of always just made decisions based on that. And I had a lot of run-ins with coaches, and I was probably a little bit uncomfortable for players and coaches and stuff like that. I wasn't always the favourite. And in the end, I thought, like, people would always say to me, you've got to be more diplomatic and stuff like that. And now that I sit here after my career, the relationships that I have with the people that I have, I only have those relationships because I was that kind of person. And the relationships that I don't have with people, they're not necessarily the people that I want to associate myself with anyway. So I think staying true to yourself through that whole process, regardless of what the outcome is, that was a really important part of me for now, life after football, having some really good relationships with some really special people that will help me later on in my career, I'm sure. So yeah, I think just staying true to yourself. Also, understanding there could be repercussions. That was just a part of who I was as a person.
What about? Look, I rate it. I rate it highly because, fucking hell, you can be a nice guy, but in football, I think it pays probably more dividends to speak your mind, and you might not always be the favourite, you might not even be the favourite in the change room, but you're probably someone that cares more than maybe other people do, and that's why you speak the truth. But when you left, obviously, and it was obviously a little bit of a shit show. You went to Germany. I know, obviously, that you're so strong-willed and your mindset in terms of wanting to stay in Europe. How did it end up that you came back to Adelaide? Obviously, I was lucky enough to play with you. I'm not complaining about it, but for someone that is the way that you are, and you were so strong-willed about staying in Europe, why did you come back?
Adelaide,
Yeah,
it was basically the only option I had at the time. I had a couple of other options, but they weren't great. And Adelaide gave me the option to have a buyout clause free in January, and I left it late anyway. And so I thought, all right, I'll go back. I'll play a few games and see if something comes in January. And yeah, in the end, that was my decision. But mate, I was devastated. It broke my heart, to be honest. I was what, 26. I was in London and I was sitting there. I was sitting on my sister's kitchen floor, and I was thinking to myself, "Fuck, what did I do wrong? Like, fucking trying to take your lessons away from it, And obviously, at that time, as a footballer, you have so many stages in your career where you feel like your whole world's falling down, right? And you work so hard for something, and life keeps you modest. But for whatever reason, I had to go through that journey, and Adelaide was a part of it. Adelaide gave me that clause in January that I could leave for free, and I thought, okay, that was, that at least keeps my dream alive, and that's why I basically took it, not necessarily because I wanted it, because I kind of had to be honest.
Yeah. Did you find it really, like, obviously it's 100%, it's such a difficult moment, obviously, when things seem like everything's gone against you, and like, probably 12, 18 months before that, you're thinking, fuck, do I go Club Brugge, Werder Bremen, big money deals, do I stay here at Austria Vienna? And then all of a sudden now you're coming back to Australia. Do you felt like that affected, I was away, so I didn't actually see too many games, but do you think that really affected your season at Adelaide, because it was like a bit of a hangover where you're like, fuck, what am I doing here? Or was your approach still really good when you were at Adelaide, that you could kind of put that to the side?
Um, Probably a bit of both. And look, I mean, my time at Adelaide was absolutely below par. And I always found wherever I went, my first 6 months were always bang average, to be honest. I always kind of needed time to adjust. And I'm not necessarily a player that's going to come in and make a difference. That's the reality. I'm a player that might come in and bring some stability into a team and stuff like that, but was never really a difference maker. And I think I always needed a bit of time just to be able to do that and establish myself in the team. And at Adelaide, I didn't do that at all. And yeah, it was absolutely, below par. But again, it was something I was aware of, and then my intention was to go do my best, and I worked as hard as I could, but I guess maybe in the back of the mind, in my subconscious mind as well, I always wanted to bounce back straight back to Europe, so that was always there. That might have affected me as well. Absolutely.
were you, for how low you were at that stage before coming to Adelaide? Are you, now that you can look back on it, are you surprised that you were able to then go probably to even higher heights after that? Probably at 26, you're thinking, "Fuck me, what the fuck happened? Like, what's happened to my career?" And arguably, I would say you probably reached your highest point after that. Maybe not with national team, but with Lask, which we'll get onto next.
Yeah, I definitely played my best football. To be honest, mate, I always had, and throughout it all, I always just had this. I guess it was a naive belief that it would work itself out and it would figure itself out, and that's kind of something I've always had in life. Um, and yeah, I mean, I can go over it for you, but the Lusk opportunity, they then had called me in December and said, "Look, if we get promoted, we want to bring you in." And I'd heard a lot about the coach at the time. I'd heard previously a lot about the coach because he was working with like a mindset coach that I knew. Um, and he was assistant coach to the Red Bull team the year we were champions. And he called me and said, "I want to bring you in June." And I had this clause in January, and I was like, "Well, I need to get out. They don't have any money to buy me." And then this Chinese option came in, and I thought, "Okay, I'll roll the dice." And knowing that this Chinese club got rid of players for fun, signed them and got rid of them, I rolled the dice and went to China and was hoping that they'd get rid of me. In the end, they didn't pay me wages. So I was able to leave in June, and that was all. That was kind of my plan in the back of my mind all along, and I got lucky instead of unlucky this time around. So yeah, it was back to Europe via an interesting stint in China.
Yeah,
Fuck
that's
me.
crazy. So you were saying you actually went there hoping that they would not pay you, so then you could go back to Austria and still get the money from China as well?
Well, look, I mean, it was never. I never ever made
You
a
would have
decision.
rather to get paid, surely.
No, I swear to God, I never made a decision based on money. And even this was not a decision based on money. It was just purely I had a clause in the contract and I had to exercise it because Lusk could never pay the transfer fee. They didn't have the money. And this Chinese
Yeah.
club came in, and I remember thinking to myself, oh, fuck. And I looked at the history of the Chinese club. They were bringing Aussie players in for fun and spitting them out for fun. So I thought, I wasn't sure how I was going to leave. But worst case scenario, I said to Klasner, in November, the season's over and I'll come in November. And then I remember they weren't paying us, and and I was with Cruzy, the whole time I was in touch with the PFA, and all the other foreigners were blowing up. We're going to the CEO, and blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, go, just don't mention us. And so they'd go and they'd blow up and get whatever money they could. And we just kept our mouth shut, and we always said, not a problem, all good. And we went by the book. I made sure I collected every bit of information for Cruzy and I. And I got every letter I needed to get. I would give it to the club and say, look, no stress. Here's the letter. We just got to give you a warning. So it was all by the book. And then my birthday was 15th of May, and coincidentally, we had a game there in Shanghai. And I remember 16th of May was the deadline. So it's basically 90 days overdue. Then you give a letter to the club and you can leave for free, and they have to pay your wages basically, and you can sign somewhere else. And we had a massive night out. There was an AFL game, Port Adelaide against Gold Coast, I think, in Shanghai, coincidentally, and we got some
Oh, fuck, I
hospitality
remember that.
tickets and bumped into Angry Dad. Angry Dad, bumped into Angry Dad over there. Had a
Yeah.
wild night out with all of the AFL boys and a couple of my best mates. The next day, woke up, still no money in my bank account. So I hadn't been paid for I think it was 4 months at the time. And yeah, went to the club, gave them a letter. They sent like all these people to our hotel. Cruzy was panicking a bit. We were panicking. Cruzy was telling people to fuck off, like get away from our room and all this shit. And the PFA, the lawyer, called us and said, "You guys have got to get out of the country as quick as possible." So we just were like booked our flights and bailed. And yeah, in the end, that was May, so I was able to sign for Lusk. So I flew to Lusk and I flew to Austria and signed the contract. So it all worked out in the end. Absolutely.
Fuck, that's
But
wild.
it was
What a
wild, yeah.
story, man.
Yeah, but it was all calculated. It was I never made the decision based on money. Obviously, people see that I've been to China. It was all about getting back to Europe. That was it. That was the only reason I made the decision. Um,
Wow.
Insane.
mm.
Insane. So you've gone back to Austria. So Lusk, they were promoted from the second league into the top league, yeah?
Second league into top league, yeah, yeah. And the current,
And
sorry, go on.
no, I was just going to say, and what's that like in terms of if you're looking, I don't know, again, you can't compare, but A League level to the second league over there or the bottom teams in the Austrian Bundesliga, is it similar level? Would you say Austria is still a little bit better? Because you've obviously gone from the A League back to there.
Um, I would say so. Obviously, I was going to the first league. The second league wasn't great. It isn't great in Austria, but it's the top teams are decent. And I knew that Lusk, basically the biggest agent in Austria, had retired, sold his agency, and bought the club with a group of people. And he's a brilliant football mind. And they bought it in the third league, got promoted to second league, and got promoted then to the first league. And I knew the coach was really good, and I saw the team. And then I thought it's my way back to Europe. You know what I mean? And it was just an opportunity. And luckily enough, it was a really good opportunity. And that's probably one of the most important decisions I made as a footballer as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, wow.
So
The
I was just going to say, what were you then, 27?
Yeah, I was 27, so I just turned 27. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's
And
really like, I guess, a lot of players struggle to get back to Europe, but at 27 especially. So that's obviously just because of the connections and obviously the impact that you had made the first time you were in Austria. Um, did you want to go back to Austria? Did you always think after you'd left, maybe I should have stuck around?
in hindsight, I mean, if you think about my time at Austria Vienna, I was a 25-year-old. I would have captained a team that normally plays for a championship and plays in Europe most years. as a 25-year-old Australian in Europe, I probably should have said yes to the opportunity. But if you put me back there 1,000 times, I would always make the same decision. I never thought I was going to land back in Austria because I thought I was going to, go to German Bundesliga, do well, and all that kind of stuff. As you always believe in yourself. But again, life happened, and that was where I ended up, and that was one of the best periods I had as a footballer, and also like probably most successful. Played my best football, and I played under a coach that was unbelievable, and turned me into a better footballer, I guess, at the time, which was, and they were my best footballing years. And I always think, now that I've lived my career, those are your best footballing years, or at least from when I look at footballers, especially in our position, Steph, those are the best football years, in my opinion, I think.
Yeah. What do you think it was about Linz? Like, why was it? Why were they able to overachieve? They'd just been promoted. They shouldn't have been able to do so well. You had that one season where you were there, where I think you went like 12 games unbeaten, doing really well in the Europa League as well. Like, that's strange for me to hear a team that's just been newly promoted can then go on so quickly to do so much.
We had a incredible coach for starters. We had the team was carefully constructed over a few years. I came in kind of, after 2 years they'd been working together, and it was a case of bringing, not just being creative because they didn't have a lot of money, but bringing the right characters in. And we had a leadership group that was really important. We had a coach that was really important, and we had all the players around all that were, the right characters for the group. And I think it was just a little bit of a perfect storm, but it was a calculated perfect storm. Like it was something that built over time. And I don't know if the coach still says that tactically that was probably one of his best teams that he had, just because we were all. But that's probably the key word, the team. We had a couple of really good individuals, but we were an unbelievable team. And we've been together for a long time, and the success kind of we just got better and better and better. But we had a really cool change room, man. We had a really cool change room. Everyone worked hard. Everyone was all about the team. There was no, Sydney Swans, no dickhead policy. We were all about that. And it was just, we were just a juggernaut, man, for Austrian standards, obviously.
What was it, do you think, like, that made this coach so good? Like, obviously you're talking about, he said tactically that the team was quite good, obviously, but was it him, the culture that he created? Was it that he made you guys kind of have, I guess, a little bit of onus on that, it can be player driven, not just coach driven? Was it, what was it exactly? Because we had Jacko Irvine, which we spoke to, and he spoke about Hertzler, kind of what he's done at St. Pauli. I'm really interested to know, I guess, what was it with this guy that made him so special, do you think?
First of all, Ollie Klasner, he's football-wise, he's incredible. So he's an incredible coach. So on the pitch, he's very clear on what he wants. He's amazing at communicating it, and he sees it straight away, communicates it straight away. He's a brilliant teacher, so he simplifies the difficult for you, basically. He makes it easy for you to understand as a footballer. And secondly, like culture-wise, he's very sensitive to all of that, and he analyzes situations brilliantly, and he's always like, if you look at his career, obviously he's been really successful, but every time his teams come into difficult situations, he's always kind of finds a solution because he's brilliant at that. And he's very big on that cultural side of things. And just to give you a small example, we were a club that didn't have much money at that time, and we went to him as a leadership group and said, breakfast, lunch, we kind of need it. And he said, all right, breakfast, we can make it happen, but you guys buy the food, and free players buy the food each week, and obviously the club will pay for it, and free players make breakfast for the team each week. And that was his idea to instill team spirit into the group. And if we didn't make breakfast for the team weren't going to play. So if we weren't going to eat, so if we didn't make a run on the field, then the team's not going to win, kind of thing. And that was his. And then we were really successful, got a lot of money, but he said, no, we're keeping that because that's a part of our culture and the part of learning responsibility, learning to look after your teammates. So 3 boys each week would be making breakfast for the team. And that was just little things, just one example, that were a big part of his coaching philosophy. And I could tell you 1,000 stories about him. But yeah, it's something that cultural aspect is something that he looked into a lot and did really well. And obviously that's why he's landed in the Premier League and very successful.
Yeah, it makes sense. What were the boys cooking?
Oh, mate, we'd whip up some eggs and yogurts with fruit. And if I was feeling generous, I'd go out to the amazing fruit store out down the road for me. I'd buy all the best products and chop them up for the lads and everything, man. Tomato, chop, just, yeah, we put on a feast for the boys.
Fuck.
Yeah.
No, that's
It's
unbelievable.
cool,
I love
though.
hearing,
It's cool.
yeah. I love hearing these little, I suppose, stories, things that the top coaches, not even top coaches, but teams that have been successful. Why is it? You know, you need great players. Yes, of course, you always need great players to play football. But for me, culture is probably, I would say, just as important as the quality that you have. And sometimes, you know, you can have the best team, but fucking hell, if you got a shit culture, that team's not going to fucking win anything.
No,
So
absolutely.
I find it
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely.
The Socceroos. I want to go on to the Socceroos stuff because obviously you got your first cap really early in the piece. I think you were 19, and then for me, I look at the stuff that happened after or post Adelaide when I played with you. You know, when you look back at your Socceroos career, do you think that there was more for you with the green and gold? I know you obviously were involved. I'm not saying that you didn't have a good career because it's great, but you were involved in World Cups and World Cup qualifiers. But for me, like that time at Lask, do you think that you should have played more games for the Socceroos?
Um, I mean, at the end of the day, football's a game of interpretation, right? And obviously, the coach at the time didn't think so. If I look at it, I do my best to look at it objectively. I was probably surprised not to get more opportunity. And then obviously, I said it. I mentioned it to you earlier. For me, the Socceroos is the pinnacle. So I would have loved to have. It's one thing that it's a little bit disappointing, obviously, because I'd love to have been involved there a lot more. And during the most successful part of my career, which I would argue and say wasn't necessarily the most successful part of the Socceroos time during my career, I wasn't a part of it. And so it didn't necessarily always add up to me. Um, but that's football, man. That's life in football. It's
Who was who was the coach throughout that period?
Arnie was the coach throughout that period. Yeah,
It
yeah.
was Arnie.
Did you ever
Did you
have a
have chats with
conversation
him?
with him?
Yeah.
Nah, I didn't ever have a conversation with him. Obviously, reporters used to ask me a lot, and it was always people used to speak to me about it. But I'm not someone in that regard. Obviously, I understand it's football, man. Sometimes coaches like you or don't like you or prefer other players, and that's just all part of it. And all you can do is just control what you can do, man. And that was my mindset on it. And I would never sit here and say I should have been a part of it. But obviously, I felt like, there was more in it for me at that time. But Arnie felt like other players were ahead of me for whatever reason. And that's just something you have to accept as a footballer. But of course, that's one thing that is disappointing because I would have loved to have been involved a lot more. I love playing for Australia.
Yeah. No, of course. I think it's and like you said, like the best thing about football is that everybody has an opinion on it, and one player, one coach may think you're the most important player in his team and wants you to be captain and thinks you're, the best thing ever, wants to take you to Cologne with him. But then another coach maybe thinks, you know what, he's not that great. I think this other player is better, and that coach technically is right because that's his opinion, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes individually very hard to take, and I'm sure the club success, and especially being in Australia here, the news of, let's say, the Austrian Bundesliga, it doesn't come to Australia that much. It's not on Channel 7 or Fox Sports News. So people,
Yeah.
not that you're playing for that, but I think if you were doing what you were doing there in the A-League, for example, you probably get more people talking about you just because that news is here. It's relevant, where because you're over there, maybe it wasn't coming back here, so it wasn't putting pressure on Arnie to maybe force his hand with it. But at the end of the day, you can't ever control that, can you?
No, for sure. And obviously, I mean, coaches are smart. They also control the narrative and the media and all that kind of stuff. That's all part of the game. So, um, whatever messages aren't coming back, they're not coming back for a reason, which I understand as well. But yeah, I mean, it didn't necessarily make sense to me at that time because if I looked at Australian footballers where everyone was, I felt like at that time I was doing better than most, and I was in a position. I think at that time we won the Europa League group against Sporting Lisbon, PSV, Rosenborg. We beat Sporting Lisbon 3-1 away, 4-1 away. The first game of the current Manchester United coach, we spanked him 4-0 at home, 4-1 at home. 3-3 at Tottenham against Tottenham. Like we were doing really well, playing big teams, winning. I was playing every week. We had at that time, I think at Salzburg, Haaland was there. Keita from the old Liverpool boy, Canute, I think was there. So we were playing. We were doing really well and competing against top teams and top players. And I was playing every week, so it was a little bit surprising, but that's football.
I agree. I agree with you. I wouldn't have asked you the question if I thought that you didn't deserve to be in there. I was curious to see, your thoughts on it, and obviously it's better to get it from the horse's mouth. But what's going on now? What's the life for you at the moment? Obviously you're still over there in Austria. Obviously it's had a heavy kind of footprint on your life and a big part of your life. But you're still over there. I see you're running on Strava. What's in the plans for James Holland now that football's done?
Based on where you guys are on the table, a 6-month stint to try and help you boys out, I think should be on the plans anyway. Nah,
Fucking hell, I think glory needs you more.
well, I reckon
Don't smash me.
Brisbane Roar maybe. Look. So I was talking to Morky before. We press record. I had an opportunity for life after football that I couldn't necessarily say no to, which is why I made the decision to retire. Unfortunately, 3 weeks before I was supposed to start the job, I got a phone call saying I didn't get the visa, which was not foreseen. And it kind of left me in a really difficult position because obviously I was over in Europe kind of alone, and I'd made sure I'd made a really conscious effort of preparing myself for life after football, just mental reasons and understanding it could be difficult and all that kind of stuff. A bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. And I think the last 6 months has been a bit of a bit difficult to navigate. And when I got the phone call about the visa, I thought to myself, okay, should I keep playing or not? And I thought, you know what, I made the decision. I'll just cut the umbilical cord off. I'll commit to it. At least I was able to make a decision to go out on my own terms as opposed to the body making the decision for me. And I thought I'll just commit to it and just prepare myself for life after football. And that's what I've started to do. And now it's about focusing on preparing myself and also hopefully starting a cool new job sometime in the near future.
Yeah, that's awesome. So coaching is what you want to get into. Obviously, you love the game. You want to be a head coach one day.
To be honest, I think I heard Ange say it once. It's kind of sit in every seat. I did as much as I could to prepare myself. I did a degree in psychology and sociology. I've done speaking courses. I've done coaching courses. I've done my B license. Currently doing my A license. So I've kind of prepared myself as best as possible. First of all, I wanted to go in the sports director direction, and then I thought, okay, a few people said they think I'd be a good coach, so I kind of landed a little bit more towards that. And now I'm just want to explore it all. So it just depends on the opportunities, and I'm lucky enough to have a couple of really cool opportunities that I'll explore. Hopefully, if everything goes to plan, and then I'll just see how I feel, I guess. And I don't take any of it for granted because I understand Aussie footballers in Europe. It's life after football. It's not every day that you get kind of those kind of opportunities. I want to at least explore them and then see what feels right in the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, that's great, and fair play to you for obviously staying over there. Obviously, the comfort blanket that we spoke about obviously would have been to come back and just go on with your life here. And I'm sure you probably could have picked up a job straight away, but you obviously still want to stick it out. You think that there's more for you with that. How have you gone mentally in terms of finishing football? That's number one. That's hard to be outside of a change room and when that's all you've known for the last 15, 20 years of your life. But how have you gone mentally, even with the setback of maybe not getting that job because of the visa and kind of preparing yourself for this next chapter?
It's been an uncomfortable process, absolutely. I think, and again, just judging on players I play with, I probably prepared myself as best as I could. Life had a different plan for me at that time. And it's been uncomfortable. Obviously, I tried never to attach myself, the identity, I'm just James Holland, the footballer. I always tried to detach myself from that. But at the end of the day, that's such a huge part of your life. And I think if you look at pillars in life that are really important for mental stability, purpose, you're going into training every day, community, you've got a group of boys around you, fitness wise, you're working out every day. I think they're really important to keep you in a healthy mindset, and all of a sudden that's taken away from you. And your identity's kind of, you have to reshape your idea of what your identity is. You have to you're responsible for maintaining structure in your life. You're responsible for working out, keeping fit. You're responsible for your social life, and all that stuff comes at you hard and fast. And I was in a foreign country with, no family and friends around me. So it's been a difficult process, but I was aware of, okay, it's probably going to be difficult. So I was happy to kind of sit in it and navigate my way through it. And I've never been in a position where I was, too overwhelmed by it. But I wouldn't call myself, I'm not necessarily in a happy place. And it's definitely been a difficult period, and it's an uncomfortable transition. But that's something I was aware of. And I know it'll be okay, if you know what I mean. It's just uncomfortable. Like, it's really uncomfortable. And I have to be aware of those pillars that I was talking about. I have to make sure, I keep some structure. I'm working out. I do my best to maintain a social life, just because I know that's really important in keeping me in a steady mental state, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's obviously, I think that's the one thing, that's guaranteed when you start playing professional football, is that your career is going to end at some point, whether that's 6 months in, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, eventually it ends. Nobody can keep playing forever. And as much as you prepare for it, sometimes it doesn't go the way that you expect it to go. And for you thought, obviously, you'd mapped it out relatively well, and then something can come along. And as we spoke about at the start, luck and bad luck, that's something that's completely out of your control. But the way you've obviously approached your career as a player, I think, is going to hold you in good stead for this. And probably that's why a lot more, you could call it luck, keeps falling your way, because of the relationships you've built and the person that you are. So I'm sure, without blowing too much smoke up your ass, I'm sure you're going to be very successful in your coaching journey.
And bring us wherever you go as well.
If not, I'll just start a podcast.
And if you want to bring me over to Austria, I'm fucking happy to come and play there, to be honest.
I'll just start a podcast, boys, if it doesn't work out.
You speak well. I'll give you that. I'll speak well. Look,
he's done a speaking course, so maybe we need to get you to sign up to it, Ben.
maybe. Look, I actually think I speak right. I don't want to, blow too much smoke up my own ass. That's what other people are meant to do for you. But I think you're a bit harsh there. But
I will say curiosity in life's important, and asking good questions is important. So you boys are curious, and you're well prepared. So you're on the right track. I think you're doing all right.
Look, you've been very generous with your time. We've got this closing tradition that we've been doing with our guests, which is just a quick fire few questions. So we're going to start off. Your most memorable moment of your career.
Oh, mate, that is a tough one. Scoring my first goal in the A-League, as corny as it sounds, that was pretty special. I couldn't even pick one out, mate. I'm trying to think. Actually, a pretty special moment was 2013 when we were champions. We were playing against a team. We were 4-0 up, I think, with 70 minutes to go. And the other players were already congratulating us on the field. And we were kind of able to, enjoy the last 20 minutes, and the fans stormed on the pitch and all that kind of stuff. That was a pretty special moment. That was pretty awesome, man. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously, there's national team and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, hard one to pick.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Best player you played with?
Another tough one. I'd say Aussie player, Marco Bresciano. He was unbelievable. When I first came to the national team, he was still at an unbelievable level, and he was a freak. So just because we're Aussies, mate, I'm going to go with Bresciano.
Yeah, good answer.
Quality. Best player you played against?
I'm racking my brain here.
You said Haaland before. He's got to be up there, surely.
Haaland was a freak, yeah. I'm trying to think of a midfielder.
Was he a freak when you played? He
played his first game in the Austrian Bundesliga against us, because Salzburg have this thing where they buy young players, they park them in. They've got a team in the second league. They park them there for 6 months, so they adjust to football, country, language, and then they bring them up. And so they'd parked him in their second team. And then toward, I think it was the last game of the season or something, he played his first game against us. And then the next season was when he kicked on and played and went to Dortmund, all that kind of stuff. And after the game, the central defenders came to me and said, "Oh, these guys are fucking unbelievable." And so, yeah, it was pretty much straight away, you could tell he was just a different beast. I'll go with Haaland there, just to keep you happy.
Yeah.
I got his jersey, actually.
Did you?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well, if you're strapped for cash, then you can just sell that one, can't you?
Yeah. It's actually not a bad shout.
Like,
Best
advice.
Sorry, I'll jump in there. Good story. We played against Atletico Madrid the year they made the finals of the Champions League. We played them in Champions League. Diego Costa spat at me in the game. And that year then we went to Brazil and played against Spain. And the guy couldn't speak a lick of English, but he recognised me after the game and said, like, was gesturing to me to wait here. And he went into the change room and gave me his jersey. And then someone translated it's because he spat on me. Sorry about spitting on you. So I got Costa's jersey as well because he spat on me. Because we were head to head and then he just spat on me. Yeah. No VAR back then.
That's quality. That's a top story. But fucking hell, what a shitbag! As if you can't do that.
Oh mate, he's the guy. If I'm picking 5 against 5, he's in my team straight away. Just a grub.
Yeah, right.
Just
that's
hates to lose.
You know what? That's one of our questions. So let's go with that one next. What's your all-time five-a-side team?
Oh, any players I played with, or played what?
Well, look, we usually do one that you've played with, one for like your favourite players of all time.
Zidane's in there. I'll go Costa because now I've told the story.
Yeah, you've got to put him in.
I've got to put him in there. Obviously, Messi. Central defender. I need a defender. A couple of defenders in there. Do I throw a goalkeeper in there as well?
You know, probably. It might help.
Who am I throwing in there? Should I throw an Aussie? I'll go central defender. I'll throw Lucas Neal in there. Just have an Aussie in there. We need some Aussies in there.
Yeah, no.
How many is that? 3.
That's 4.
4. And now I need a goalkeeper, right?
Yeah,
Who have I
one
got?
goalie.
Who have I got? Buffon, my favourite keeper.
No.
He's in there.
Big GG. Yeah, not bad. Not bad. But we've got 2 more. Best advice for young footballers. Obviously, you're potentially gone into the coaching space. So you're coaching a young side. What's the advice for the young players in that team?
Oh, that's a tough one, man. I did a podcast a few weeks back and someone asked me what would I tell a younger version of myself, and the answer was it's going to be okay, because I think and to be present, you know what I mean? But the best is whenever anyone asks me about like what's important for a young footballer, I would always say resilience. Like resilience is such an important thing to have as a footballer, because life's tough and football's tough, and I think resilience is such an important factor to get through.
Yeah.
Be resilient.
Great answer. I actually love that question. I love always hearing different players what they think is important for younger players to know. But last one.
Before we go on to the next one, Ben.
Yeah.
I know we're meant to do 5 quick fire questions and they're fucking long fire like always. But
I got time, boys. No worry.
Resilience. I'm curious. Like I'm obviously really interested in this space. I think Ben is as well. But like, how do you think you build resilience? Like you're talking young players here in Australia. How do they build resilience? Obviously, everybody has a different, journey when they're a younger kid. Some people are born with, money, no money in a certain country, whatever it is. So there's things that aren't controllable, obviously, but things, let's say, that can be somewhat controllable. How do you think, if you had to build resilience in young players, how would you do that?
Good question, man. Tough one to answer. Are you familiar with Angela Duckworth? She's written a book called Grit, I think, and they basically did a study on young kids as they got older, a big study, and it was, in the end, what determines the successful ones from the unsuccessful ones. And the answer was that the only consistent thing that they found was grit. So she's all like study of grit, so resilience and grittiness, basically. And she says, obviously, as you said, life circumstances play a massive role in it. And I think that's obviously hard to replicate. And I think growing up in adversity obviously builds resilience. And she also said establishing a growth mindset. So um, praising players for the process as opposed to the outcome. She said that's also an important part of resilience. And I also think if you're a coach, you can create that also in your culture as well. Create adversity during games. Make sure you're consistent in your in how do I say it, rewarding players for the right reasons, and also pulling players up for the wrong reasons, for the right reasons, I guess. And I think you can kind of create that culture as a coach. But yeah, so I think kind of growth mindset, trying to praise players for the process, and I think also then establishing that as in the culture as a coach. But I do think it's hard, man. I think growing up, your circumstances play a massive role in it, probably the biggest role in it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, for sure. No, I appreciate
Angela
that.
Duckworth,
Go on,
mate.
Ben. What's the last one? Get it out.
Study her. Study Angela Duckworth into resilience and grit. She's good. She's amazing.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's top. Look, we'll leave it there because.
Well, you got
I
one more
think-
question for me, mate.
Well, yeah, but we've just gone back deep, and now I'm going to ask you best stadium you've ever played at.
We needed resilience to play in that stadium. Because you read the book. Angela. Fucking James
mate.
Duckworth.
Grit. You need a bit of grittiness in you.
No,
Best stadium. Atletico Madrid was pretty cool. That was a pretty special stadium.
was it the
the
new
new
one
one you
or
were
the
at?
old one?
2014. What was it?
That would have been the old one then.
No.
That's where we were at, Ben, where we went and watched Barca and Atletico play.
Yeah, the Calderon.
The thing is, I played at Tottenham and Old Trafford, but it was during COVID, so there was no fans. So
Yeah.
yeah, disappointing. But Tottenham and Old Trafford,
Right,
obviously,
what a-
incredible stadiums. Sporting played at Sporting
spew.
once with fans and once without fans. Yeah, iffy
Yeah,
with
wow. Fuck, great.
that. Porto,
Look-
Porto's cool.
Yeah. Too many big
mate.
games that you played in.
Central Coast Mariners, mate.
Um,
Central Coast Stadium.
the sauce bottles, you can't beat it.
Oh, mate, what a
Look,
view.
Dutchy, we won't keep you any longer. You've been so generous with your time. You did say to me off air that this would be one of the best chats that we've ever, or the best chat. If it wasn't the best chat, there was something wrong. It obviously has been a very good chat because we've gone on for quite a while. But look, just want to congratulate you on a stellar career. Everything that you achieved, I think, from your mindset, the way that you've gone about your things when you played is a testament to the career you had and everything that you achieved. So thank you very much. Wish you all the best in your retirement. I hope to see you coaching at a very high level soon, and me and Steph will be waiting for a phone call, mate.
Kit man.
What a great chat that was. I knew it would be, but he fucking speaks well, doesn't he?
Yeah. The speaking workshops have definitely done well for him. I wonder if he did speak good with Jared Walsh, maybe.
I don't
Walshy down
think he wasn't in Adelaide for long enough to do that.
Nah, well, Walshy, if not, we've just given you a shout out, so you can thank us for that. I'm sure you're tuning into the podcast because everybody in Australia does. But yeah, nah, he was great to listen to. I think, one thing that sticks out with me was that first thing he said about that. I went to Europe and I wasn't coming home. When his agent called him, he said, "Don't fucking call me back to offer me to another Australian club because I'm going to be walking on my, what did he say, crawling on my hands and knees back to Australia before I take an offer." And, that's something that I wish both of us were more so like. And I think the A-League has become bigger since probably he was getting those offers maybe, and the money and the security, and maybe we were mentally just a little bit weaker, to be honest, because that's the approach you do need to have, and that's why he's carved out the career he's had, and even then coming back to Australia, going back over to Austria through China, he's had a top career, and he's played in Europa League, won championships. The network that he's created over there is going to hold him in good stead for life after football. So he's a very very good guy and someone that I think, deserves all the success that comes his way, because he's obviously an extremely hard worker and very resilient, which he spoke about as the advice for young players. And that's why he's had such a good career.
Yeah. Nah, it was a top chat. It was a top chat. I loved how open he was about, some of the tough periods that he went through as well. Like, it's not all fucking sunshine and rainbows, and we say it every single time, but every single player goes through the fucking shit. And it's funny because you got these checkpoints along your career, that might be certain milestones that you reach or clubs you play for. And, we were at the same checkpoint at one stage. We were both at Adelaide, but our stories before that, they're so different, and every single player's story is different before, after. So yeah, I think the testament for him is the hard work, the mentality. He spoke about, not having a lot, growing up, but he didn't use that as something to have an excuse. He used it as something I'm going to fucking make sure that, I make something for myself, because I haven't maybe had as much as other people. And he says that, there's resilience. It's hard to build resilience. It comes a lot through your experiences, your life experiences, your upbringing. So he definitely used all of that, all of the hard times for the better. And he's done really, really well for himself. But hope you guys at home enjoyed the chat. It was a pleasure doing it. And obviously, as always, the social media, fucking hell, I nearly bottled that. The social media, follow us, guys. We're Football Friends Pod on Insta and TikTok. We're at Ben and Stef Pod on X, and Football Friends with Ben and Stef on YouTube. We'll be back to wrap up another week of football on Monday. Watch all the football this weekend, and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Thanks, guys.